Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the program. My name is Jeff, otherwise known as the Economic Prepper. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that I haven't talked about much. I've talked, not recently. I've talked about it in the past. But today I'm going to talk about gold. Now, I've talked about silver, I've talked about Bitcoin, but today I'm going to talk about gold. Why will gold come back into the conversation? We were talking about inspecting Fort Knox. We haven't talked about that in a while. What's the importance of July? What is Basel? What is Basel III? What does it all mean for the banking system? And how are we going to return to sound money? Lots to talk about. I've given myself about 10 minutes. Let's dig right into it. Thanks for joining me. Here we go. Let me share my screen. I'm going to share two things from Google to explain Basel III in the July timeframe. So first off, just looking up July Basel III USA. The summary I get from this, and sorry for the scrolling around, but I'm trying to get this in frame. Basel III. The implementation of the Basel III Endgame in the U.S. is scheduled to begin on July 1st, 2005, with a 3-year phase-in that ends on June 30, 2028. This refers to a set of new banking regulations aimed at strengthening bank capital and liquidity requirements, as well as addressing market and credit risks. U.S. Federal Reserve and FDIC proposed the final rule in July of 2023, and it pushed all the way back out to July 1st, 2025. The purpose is to strengthen the U.S. banking system by increasing capital and liquidity requirements, basically meaning you got to have more stuff on hand so you don't go under banks. That's the idea. Key elements: increased capital requirements for globally system important banks, banks too big to fail, increase of 21%, as well as a 10% increase for regional banks. So all the banks got to have more capital so they're less likely to go under. Now, key point next. Gold is a liquid asset starting July 1st, 2025. That is not long from now. Physical gold will be classified as a high-quality liquid asset, HQLA, a Tier 1 asset under Basel III, meaning it can be counted towards core capital reserves. The impact, I'll get to the impact, let me just read the last bullet here. Some potential impacts include increased capital requirements, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's not get into that. I'm going to go to this other tab where I search Gold Basel III US July, which also says that starting in July 1st of this year, U.S. banks will be able to count physical gold as a Tier 1 HQLA, which is a high-quality liquid asset, under Basel III regulations. This means they can include 100% of the market value of gold toward their core capital reserves, a significant change from the previous Tier 3 classification, which marked gold down by 50%. This reclassification is expected to increase demand for physical gold among U.S. banks. Okay, let me drop out of here and just talk to you for a minute. Let me explain this in real terms. Okay, starting July 1st, banks have to have more capital so that they don't go under. That's the rule under Basel III, and the U.S. is adopting it as of July 1st of this calendar year, roughly 1 month from now, a little bit longer. Call it 5 weeks. When that happens, gold is now a Tier 1 asset, which means instead of valuing it at 50% of value, like when they do their books and saying, how much assets do you have, bank, so you don't go under, right? If they're raising that number, that would normally mean they'd have to have more assets. But they're revaluing the assets of gold to double it from 50% to 100%. So if their asset requirements are 10%, now it's 21%. Stocking up on gold makes sense because you can buy it now and it's worth double on July 1st. That is why banks across the globe that are complying with Basel III have been stockpiling gold. Not just because they're worried about the financial system, which they should be. With the fact that the fiat currency system is all going up and inflation's going crazy everywhere. Japan is having a financial crisis bigger than Greece. That's what they're saying. That's what the financial prime minister, I think that's his title, in Japan has basically said this is going to be worse than Greece. That's not good because Japan and the yen carry trade, which basically means borrowing for 0% interest in Japan, and you take your money, you stick it in Japan, you borrow it for 0%, and then you buy it elsewhere, we get returns of 3 to 5 to 10% or more. That's the yen carry trade because Japan has been 0% to borrow money for a long, long time. And now it's like 3% and going up. So that's kind of screwing up the whole math behind everybody. So all the banks are going up. The bank values are going to go down. they would go down because the interest rates are going to go up and they have trouble lending. But now Basel III is coming to the rescue. Basel III comes to the rescue. That's why all the banks are stockpiling gold, because now their books are going to look better because they are more stable, because the gold that they bought for $2,500 to $3,500 an ounce is now going to be worth on their books that number instead of half of that. So if they had $1 million of gold, let's just say a bank, let's say Chase Bank has $100 million worth of gold. All right, I'm just picking a number. On their accounting books, when they do their quarterly reports and their earnings calls, that $100 million of gold is valued at $50 million today. On July 1st, it will be valued at $100 million. They will gain $50 million on accounting changes. That's it. They don't have to do anything special. That's why they're stockpiling gold. Why does this matter? What's the big deal? Gold's going to enter the conversation again in July, which is when we're going to say, hey, what's going on at Fort Knox? Then we'll look at that. We'll look at see how much gold we have in Fort Knox. And at that point in the economy, July, the summer it'll be slower. Most people just take the summer off from the financial world. That's what they do, just the overall trend. And then things will heat up around Labor Day, which is time to talk about the next budget for the United States. Somewhere in there, they could also introduce a different currency, which is, they'd like to do certain things over the summertime. Look back in 1971, August 15th, when Nixon took us off the gold standard in not a direct conversation speech, but that's, if you knew what he said and could read between the lines, you kind of saw the writing on the wall. So, I believe, my own personal opinion, Basel III is happening in July. That's a fact. Gold will be worth more than, that's a fact. We're going to want to look and see how much gold we have. That's when we're going to audit the Fort Knox probably over the summer. Then, between then and October 1st, maybe right after the budget, I believe a new currency will be introduced. Maybe not in the U.S., maybe globally, maybe with a partnership with BRICS. I don't know who's going to introduce it, but there's going to be a gold-backed asset currency that the U.S. and their allies are going to use. And what will happen then is that will be the preferred currency. It's going to be the reverse of 1971. People, rather than getting out of the dollar and getting into gold and silver because they saw the writing on the wall that this thing is going to hyperinflate to infinity, that was bad. So what's going to happen now is that people are going to run to gold and silver, but if Trump and his team, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, who are very smart individuals, they know how to do this. If they introduce with their allies a new currency that is backed by silver, gold, Bitcoin, an asset-backed currency that they all can use, they can lead. This will be a boom for the American consumer who has a bunch of debt. Because what will happen is there'll be two currencies in play now. Okay, so you have the dollar, and you'll have this new asset-backed currency. I'll call it the gold dollar. The gold dollar will hold its value instead, or the constitutional dollar. They may frame it that way. There's lots of different ways they can frame it, but there's got to be a new asset-backed currency introduced to the marketplace. Now, smart and savvy people like yourself are going to say, I want that one instead of these things. So as more and more people will get representation of silver and gold with a new currency, this will hyperinflate. No one will want this anymore. Fewer people will want this anymore, which means all the debts in this will hyperinflate. So if you have a $20,000 credit card bill right now, or $20,000 balance on your credit card, $20,000 bill, that'd be high. But let's say you have $20,000 of debt of some way, shape, or form. Instead of making a $500 payment, and that's like a car payment right now, pretty soon that'll be like a cup of coffee, because these things will be worth less and less. They will hyperinflate, which means your debt will hyperinflate to virtually meaning nothing. So between what he's doing with the Genius Act and stablecoins, and what I believe is going to be coming with an asset-backed currency, and Basel III, which is steering us in that direction, and the audit of Fort Knox, which will steer us in that direction of using hard money assets and Bitcoin and strategic reserve, we're all headed down that way. We're making steps towards backing our currency with something versus nothing. And the way that you get the people out of debt is that this hyperinflate to nothing. When you have a $10,000 debt and it's about the price of a car payment or a cup of coffee even, then you can pay off your debts very easily. You just translate the good currency to the bad currency and pay it off. And you don't have to change anything because all old debts will be denominated in this stuff, not the new currency, whatever they call it. So, a lot said today. Hopefully I made it clear. I did it in 10 minutes. So, I read every comment. Please leave a comment down below. Like, share, subscribe, share this out there, get the message out. I'm trying to explain things as quickly and simply as I can. Hopefully you enjoy this, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.